Is your team not performing well? Is morale low and turnover high? Are you falling further behind the competition? I'm here to help. I'm your host, Shani, and this is the Leadership Show, where business strategy and culture finally meet, and we make the long-awaited shift from rhetoric to results. I promise I'm not your typical boring leadership consultant, and I will help you get your shift together. Let's do this. Welcome, Leadershifters, to another episode of the Leadership Show with Shani. And today, you're going to hear from an impactful leader in one of the coolest divisions of the coolest companies in America. We have on the show today Kurtis Jetsel, who is a director of program management at Lockheed Martin in the Missiles and Fire Control Division. Yep, the people who make the rockets and all the cool stuff, the missiles and the neatest things that protect our country and keep us safe.
Right.
Welcome to the show, Kurtis.
Thanks. It's so great to be with you, Shani. Thanks for having me.
It's my pleasure. You've always been one of my favorite clients to keep in touch with because I think your passion about leadership rivals mine. Folks, Kurtis is a leader in action, and he's a leader in what's the word I'm looking for? A leader in voice too. He's an avid student of leadership. He voraciously reads anything about great leadership, and I will ask him about the leadership newsletter that he started at Lockheed many years back as a question further into the show.
All right. Fun.
Yep. So you're joining us from Dallas today, right?
I am, yes.
Yep.
Yep.
And Missiles and Fire Control, your two main offices are Dallas and Orlando, and it's been my privilege to come in and work with your teams, mainly teaching some of your people leaders how to be more coach-like in their approach.
Yes. Leaders.
And I know that's
coaching.
something you share and interest in as well.
Absolutely.
So, when and why did you become so passionate about leadership?
All right. Okay. So I'll share a story with you.
Okay.
This story goes back 20 plus years ago. I was working so I've been with Lockheed Martin for 35 years.
Because you started when you were in like the 7th grade.
Right. So that's it. Yes. And so it's just been an incredible journey. I'll tell you what happened. So I was working in Grand Prairie at the Missiles and Fire Control Division on a product that was going to be tested. And so I had been working on it for almost 2 years. And they said, hey, would you go to a remote location and share with the team how to put the product together? And then, by the way, you can stay there for the test. And so as you can imagine, and you've been part of a team before that is very high performing and has a lot of stress and has a deadline and has to work long hours. And that kind of an experience is a very bonding kind of an experience, right?
Right.
And so we did that for about a 3-month period. We had a great test. I get a call from my leader the day of the test, and he says, will you stay? The next product is on its way out there. They want you to stay for another 3 months and show them how to do it again. And by the way, you can stay for another test. And okay, sure, great. And about halfway through that second series of tests that we were working there, we came to work on a Monday morning to find that the leader and the deputy of the team had been, they lost their job over the weekend. So they'd been fired over the weekend due to some things that had happened. And the response of the team was really wild the first day. So on Monday, about half the team left. There was all kinds of emotions, from anger to sadness, even people crying, things being thrown around. And I'm thinking, wow, we've got this test we're preparing for. How am I going to get this done, right? Half the team just left.
Right.
And so that day was wasted.
It went from high to in the sewer.
It did, absolutely, right? From over one weekend.
Right.
And so the next day the team shows up and essentially we have a stand-up meeting, and I don't know if you can see, but they're standing around with their arms crossed, right? And and they look at me and say, what do we do? What do we do, Kurtiss? And so Lockheed Martin has a tagline that says, we never forget who we're working for. And we were in a place where there were a lot of our customers around. And so me trying to think quick, let's not forget who we're working for, guys. Let's go get with this product and get the test going. And their response was, yeah, who we're working for got fired over the weekend. We're not buying into your cutesy little tagline. Thank you very much. and so it was this moment and this epiphany that, wow, I'm wholly unprepared. I don't know what to do to guide or lead this team through this tragedy, right? For them, it was a tragedy. And so at that point, I did something that some people find a little bit bizarre. And that was, I made leadership a hobby. So if you think about hobbies, right? It's something that we like to do, that we want to get better at, that we spend money on, that we practice. And so really what that's done for me since the late 90s has just, as you mentioned before, it's just created this very intensely curious student of leadership and learning. And so that's, and I committed at that time, and it was really because of the pain and the struggle that I saw on these people's faces from this experience, right? I committed at that time, I'm not ever going to be in a position where I don't know what to do to help a team navigate and get through a situation like this. So that second 3 months actually turned into 6 years.
Oh boy.
Right. So I was transferred to this location and ended up working there for 6 years. And so I had about 6 years to practice, if you will, practice my new hobby of leadership. And so I would go every day to the library. The internet was around in the late 90s. In the location we were, it wasn't very fast. So I actually found myself in the library.
Yeah, and it was still like in the you got mail days where it was dial up and all.
Yes, exactly. And so I just started studying on what can I do and what do these people need, and how can I respond and serve them in a way that would allow them to get back to the high engagement and the excitement that they had before their leaders lost their jobs. And so since then, it's just been a huge experiment, if you will. It's kind of fun to think about the last 20 plus years being as just this experiment where I've had some really great results, and then I've had some really, really bad results, right? Or some really lousy results from my experiments that haven't gone, from a leadership perspective, haven't gone so well, right? So that's really what's caused me to have the passion and excitement, and then just seeing the influence that leaders can have on individual lives, right? People's lives, and be able to change them for the better is just so exciting for me. And then seeing people grow and develop has been such a passion for me.
Right. Well, you obviously have had more successes in your leadership experiment than failures, because I know that Lockheed has continued to send you to different units, different projects, different locations, to kind of clean up some cultural messes.
Right.
Are there, I know that I don't want to cross any boundaries, but are there any sort of generic stories that you could speak to around that subject?
Sure. So it was funny when I committed that I was never going to be in a position where I would allow this to happen again, right? And start to so really, as I read another quote, by the way, that I'll share with you, and it was by Jim Rohn, and the quote was something like, "Success is not something we must pursue; it's something we attract by the person we become."
Oh yeah, nice.
And so I decided, what kind of a leader do I want to become, right? And then just set out to become that kind of a leader. And so that allowed me, I think, to attract, if you will, these opportunities then to practice at a different level, at a different site, in different situations, the hobby that I had and the skills that I had developed through my hobby. So one of them, I'll tell you an interesting experience. I got a phone call that said, "We would like for you to apply for this job." By the way, this has become a pattern over my career since then. We'd like for you to apply for a job. And when I ask about the conditions or situations, then my typical response is, if you get the job, we'll share this with you. We'll share these kinds of things with you, right? So,
which is the first sign of trouble.
right.
If everything was great, they would just tell you.
Right. Yes. And so after I had a position in a new role, I met with an organizational development specialist, and the first words out of her mouth were, "Kurtis, this team is so messed up, it can't be fixed. Good luck."
You're like,
and then,
game on, challenge accepted.
Right. Yeah. And so over the next 3 years, then I was able to take, and really part of the issue was a leadership issue, right? It seems to be, that's a recurring theme as well. We have leaders that are not bad people. They're just not effective leaders. And so those leaders create havoc and discontent and disengagement and those kinds of things. And so I've had a number of opportunities then to come in and help change the culture and turn things around. And so this particular team, I was able, over about a 3-year period, to increase engagement scores. So an interesting thing about the company is, about every 3 years, we go through some pretty serious surveys where we measure engagement and we measure leadership scores. And so I've had at least 2 opportunities where I've come into a situation where I've had recent scores that have been in the tank, right? Pretty red, if you will. And then 3 years later, scores that can show some improvement. And so have had a number of those kinds of opportunities to do that.
Okay. So let's actually talk about some of the ways that you have shared this hobby with your colleagues informally, because obviously you've had many opportunities to formally do it as part of your role, but you also, and this is where we'll diverge into talking about the wiggles, which for those of you who have ever been parents of young children, which I haven't, but from my nephews, I know the other wiggles was like some Australian TV show for children. This is not that Wiggles. Wiggles stands for what good leadership looks like.
Right. Yes.
So tell us a little bit about why you decided to, it's a little vulnerable to share some of your experiences and tips in an organization that's large and bureaucratic and so forth. So
okay, sure. So I'll tell you how that got started. I was on reporting to a leader, and we had gotten some survey results back for the entire organization. And it said that our leadership scores from the previous survey were in decline. And so the leader pulled the staff together and said, what can we do to improve our scores, essentially? And there were immediately suggestions like, bring Shaney in and never teach us how to be better coaches, right? Which are great suggestions, particularly when we want our leaders to be better coaches, right?
Right.
There were other more generic type. Well, we need to send them to this training or this, or we need to do the things that we've done in the past, right? And we know that someone had a definition of insanity, and that was to continue to do what you've done in the past and expect different results, right?
Yep, exactly.
And so when I brought that up, of course, the leader pointed at me and said, okay, Mr. Smart Man, tell us what we want to do different, right? Tell us what you're going to do different.
Right.
So I was kind of challenged and said, okay, yeah, we're open to something different. Go figure out what that is. So I pulled my staff together and we did some brainstorming. And for my own development, I'll tell you what was funny. When I started making leadership a hobby, I was overwhelmed at the amount of leadership material that's out there. And it was almost to the point where I thought, this is so overwhelming. I don't even know where to start. I'll never be a great leader. It's just too much, right? And I came across another quote, and I think this one was by Robin Sharma, and he talks about these little incremental daily practices and improvements that when you aggregate those over a period of time, you can see some changes, right?
Yep.
And so I decided that would be my leadership development, my own personal leadership development strategy.
Okay.
I would pick something, a way of being, if you will. So let's just say I wanted to be more authentic. I would study how to be more authentic and then pick little things that I could do each day to try to evolve that and be better at demonstrating authenticity. And so that was the concept behind this idea of what good leadership looked like, which was a concept that we picked for 1 week, and we sent it out to the leadership team and said, hey, here's your focus area. And we aligned those areas with what we saw in the survey as for areas for development. Mm-hmm. And we said, this is what we want you to do this week. And we gave them 2 or 3 simple suggestions for mm-hmm. what they could do that week to apply that particular skill or behavior. Mm-hmm.
Great.
And so that started out in a small organization, and then it was popular, seemed to be very popular, lots of very positive feedback. And now it goes to 4,000, I think, leaders across missiles and fire control and even other business areas in Lockheed Martin.
Yeah.
And so it's been fun to see that.
I think that's wonderful. And honestly, that is what good leadership looks like, which is stepping out of your comfort zone to influence other people. I'm sure you didn't get paid more for doing Wiggles, right? It was just something that you felt passionate enough that you wanted to share some of the research and experiments that you were doing with other people and challenge others to be an even better version of themselves. So to me, like, that is exemplary leadership. Like, showing up and doing your job, that's just part of what you do to earn your paycheck. That goes above and beyond.
Right.
You know, something I always am curious about and always pleasantly surprised whenever I come work with Lockheed and other organizations that I'll just describe as kind of left-brained, right? I mean, when I'm working with your leaders, they're mostly engineers and legit rocket scientists, right? And so how does the touchy-feely soft stuff go over with that kind of population?
Yeah, that's a great question. And as you can imagine, it's uncomfortable, right? For the most part, it's uncomfortable. In fact, when the team came back with the idea that we wanted to do this weekly distribution to the leadership team, the first response from the leader was, "Ooh, I don't know how that's going to go over." And so what I said is, okay, how about this? What if we do a small experiment with a small group of left-brain leaders for 6 months, and let's get feedback from these left-brain leaders on what they think about this idea, right? And so that's really what we did. We picked a small group and we started sending them to this what leadership looks like. They came back in 6 months and said, "We love it. We are getting great value out of this.
Okay.
Yes, it's having results." See, that, that was really what enabled the larger application of this, was those left brain engineering leaders came back and said, "Wow, these things are actually working." They're working with people, and so help us learn more of this.
Oh,
so
go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, we had a part of a campaign called "Lead Like an Engineer," and so we actually leveraged their left brain thinking to a degree, right, in the application of some of these softer skills and these people skills to help them be more effective leaders. It was very well received.
That's great. Well, that helps fight the good fight of convincing people that this stuff, it's not actually soft. It's first of all, they're hard to do, but also when we do them, it's what makes the difference in sort of commitment instead of compliance from our people, right? Yes. And because even left brain engineering types need to connect with other human beings on another level in order to develop trust and respect and commitment. And so what I say all the time to people is, get it out of your head that things like coaching and vulnerability and transparency are soft skills, Because
Right.
when you do them, I'm telling you what, you're going to see more hard, cold cash.
Yes. Yes. And absolute evidence, right? And by the way, they're not easy to implement, right? It
That's right.
takes getting out of your comfort zone. It takes really pushing into, leaning into that discomfort. Right.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I'm working on that right now with a group of leaders. The activities that we did today, we're pushing them just a little bit outside their comfort zone and proving to them, I didn't die of embarrassment. That,
Right.
I did it. No one's freaking out because it wasn't perfect, right?
Right.
And which kind of aligns with what you were just talking about in terms of small achievable steps. Like take it one
Yes.
step at a time, and when you look back, you'll realize how much progress and growth has been made.
Absolutely. Right.
So good.
Yeah.
So another question I have for you is, what's worked to affect cultural change in an organization which is more, sort of, let's call it old school, right? Sort of
Right.
a structured command and control, right? I mean, you guys, your biggest client is the US government and military and so forth. And so it might seem counterintuitive to have that kind of a regimented type of organization be open to cultural change and so forth. And so what are some of the messaging techniques that you've noticed have worked that other folks who work in similar industries can learn from you?
Right. That's a great question. The each one of the business areas in Lockheed Martin has embarked on some sort of a culture transformation or change
Yep.
type of journey, very much for the reason that you stated, right? Our culture typically was very hierarchical, command control, right? And there was a realization a number of years ago, and it very likely started with our CEO, Bob Stevens, who started what he called full spectrum leadership, and was a focus on changing leadership behaviors. And then certainly Marillyn Hewson today, right, just absolutely embodies what great leadership looks like and expects
Yep, we're coming back to her.
Okay.
I've got
Yeah.
questions for you about
Okay.
Marillyn. Yeah.
Okay. So specifically, our business area of Lockheed Martin Missile and Fire Control is on a journey that we called culture optimization. And those words were picked specifically because there was a sense that part of the culture was very good, right? There's an execution piece of the culture that was very good that we didn't want to lose.
Right.
Yet we realized that there were, if we continued in the same hierarchical, very, very top down type culture, we were not going to be agile. We were not going to be able to attract the best and brightest, especially as our gray, right? The gray tsunami, as our baby boomer generation starts to retire, we were not going to be able to attract the right people. So there was a definite realization in the senior leadership level that we needed to do something to change the pieces of the culture that we could change. So about 8 years ago, we started down this journey of this culture optimization, and it's been something that we talk about, we meet on, we have leaders that go to seminars, it's part of our surveys now, right? How is this culture optimization journey impacting your employee experience, for example? Mm-hmm. So we ask those questions to get feedback, and then we do things to respond and to change. I'll give you one quick example of something.
Please, yeah.
that we've done. We a number of years ago, we had feedback that our culture was just very uptight, right? And it was very consistent with command control, uniform kind of, right? Yep. And there was at one point in our culture, there was a need for that, right? What we do was very serious, and so we have to take it seriously. We have a great purpose, and yet there was an opportunity to relax that, if you will, and still maintain the seriousness and the interest and the execution piece of it. And so we started a jeans day.
Okay.
So every Friday or every Thursday before and off Friday was jeans day.
Okay.
Allowed us to wear jeans. And that was a big hit. That was about 3 years ago, right? Wow, we don't have to wear slacks and tie, right? So we kind of relaxed the dress code. And then just this year, we implemented a dress code called Dress for Your Day. And essentially, every employee, if you are in a position where you are just working your job, you're not going to be meeting with customers or anybody, any kind of an important meeting, you can wear jeans every day of the week.
So it's basically saying you're adults, dress appropriately for what you got going on.
Exactly.
Oh,
yes.
Isn't that nice?
A novel idea, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Treating people with respect, that they actually have some common sense. It's great.
Right. And it's just been a huge hit. It's gone over very well. And of course, as you can imagine, we had leaders that worried about it, right? That didn't think it was going to be successful, that were concerned, and all those concerns were just not founded. It's just been a great success. And so that's just one example of some feedback that the company used in the surveys to help start to change the culture and help it and show employees, demonstrate that, no kidding, we trust you to make decisions about what you wear to work.
Yeah, God, no kidding. And I love that you called it culture optimization, because you were speaking their language, right? I mean, what's more engineering than optimization, right?
Right.
And so
Yes.
meeting people where they are and making them feel like this is doable and that it's not antithetical to how we work.
Right. Yeah.
Okay.
So that, as you can imagine, very much resonated with, to optimize something, right? We're optimizing our designs. We're optimizing our processes. Now we're optimizing our culture. Yeah, very much resonant.
Well, that's music to my ears, because the leadership tagline is culture and strategy have to meet.
Right.
So
Absolutely.
I love that culture has really been elevated to a strategic level in your organization. All right. So I want to spend our last little bit of time, you previewed it, talking about your amazing female CEO, Marillyn Hewson, who was named CEO in 2013. And since that time, because you know me, once an investment banker, not always an investment banker, but I can't stop myself. Right. I looked up the stock price since she took the helm, and it's about slightly more than tripled.
Yes.
Since she took the helm. So is it economic, or is it attributable to her? Is it, so tell us about how her leadership has changed the company.
Yeah. So this, my experience, of course, I want to attribute it to her, right? I'm sure there are lots of factors, right, that go into stock price. Clearly, she's been a leader that's been cutting edge, right? That has done so much for diversity and inclusion, that has done so much for advancing women and minorities in senior leadership roles. So if you go back 10 or 15 years and look at the board of directors and the senior leadership of Lockheed Martin, and you look at it today, you see a very different makeup of that senior leadership. So she has brought women into the senior leadership roles that are just absolutely phenomenal, that demonstrate that the aspects and the nature that women bring into the world are extremely effective in leadership roles, right? And it's just, so having that at the top then just permeates down through the organization, right? She has an expectation that leaders will create an inclusive environment. And in fact, I was sent to training that absolutely changed my life. It was diversity and inclusion training. It was by white men as full diversity partners, and it was called the White Man's Caucus.
Oh.
Yes, right. And it was 4 days of this extremely immersive into how I see myself, my own biases and my own upbringing, and how that impacts how I see the world, right? And literally for me, that training I kid you not, and I don't say this lightly yet. And it was probably a situation where the student was ready. Me as the student, I was ready, and so
Right.
that showed up for me in a way that really sent me on another level of a journey of self-understanding and reflection and awareness, so that I could make better decisions, so that I could create a more inclusive environment, so that when I saw a situation, I'll share with you a quick story that I saw shortly after this training I went to. I was in a meeting, and it was a brainstorming meeting, and I was not leading, I was participating in the meeting.
Mm-hmm.
And we were going around the table offering ideas, and a female at the table offered an idea, and the leader said, okay, thank you for that, and went around. And then one of the friends of the leader offered an idea that was it wasn't word for word what the female had said, but it was almost identical. And you would have thought that this idea was sent down from the heavens.
Yeah.
And I saw the female actually you could see the disappointment, the discouragement just come over her physically, right?
Yeah.
And so after the meeting, I got the leader aside, and I said, can I share with you an observation that I had in this meeting? And I shared with him what had happened, and the leader was absolutely horrified. They had no idea that they had done that and the impact that it had, right? And so the leader ultimately went back and had a conversation with the female, apologized profusely,
Mm-hmm.
and then came back in a public setting and said, I want this team to know that this was brought to my attention, and I want you to help me not ever let that happen again. I'm making it safe for you to bring it up, right? And so it was things like that I started to notice, and it really had a big impact. And I was horrified, thinking, oh my gosh, how many times have I done that, right? And a lot of that, I think, in a lot of this journey that we've gone through from a diversity and inclusion perspective, has been with Marillyn at the helm there, and leading and demonstrating the behavior and helping us understand how we can create an environment and a culture that allows all our voices to be heard. And so it's really been phenomenal.
Marillyn with 2 L's.
That's right.
Right? Like that just, it reinforces how strong she is. She's got 2 L's in her name.
That's right.
Well, God, thank you for sharing that story. And I'm pleased to hear that the leader was receptive to the feedback and horrified and immediately went to clean it up, because that ain't easy either, to be like, oh my God, I screwed up.
Right.
I'm horrified. And to just be open about it. I think that's best practice, because we can't help our filters, right? We had the life we have, and we can't help but bring them into every purview of our life.
Right.
But we can be more self-aware and make some behavioral changes, even just small, nuanced ones, to compensate for our biases, even if the biases aren't necessarily coming from a negative place. Just the fact that we have the bias is causing us to see or not see certain things. And I think that's the key, is to make it safe for people to speak up and notice it, and then to own it and discuss it and ask for support around it. And just like making it safe to have the conversation is such a big stride, because diversity and inclusion just used to be, all right, let's look at a scoreboard. How many women did we hire? How many people of color did we hire? How many, people with different sexual orientation did we hire? Well, that's not diversity. That's a cop-out. Diversity is like, do we really listen, right? That's where the inclusion comes in. Do we really listen to all the valuable different points of view that the diversity affords us?
Right. Do we value their contribution, right? Do we value their voice?
Yes.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah. And what was shocking to me was that leader totally had no idea that he had done that, right? And it was clearly a blind spot that the leader had. And when I pointed it out, it was this revelation that was just, like I said, just really, really bothered him. And to the point where he said, I need help, right? I have to create a place where if that occurs, people stand up right at that moment and let me know that, right? So
yeah. And by the way, the roles can be reversed too. Women are also gonna have some missteps like that, and we're gonna make some assumptions about men that are untrue or behave a certain way that, you know, in a defensive way that isn't necessary. So I think it's everybody increasing their awareness is super important. So speaking of super important, I think that this conversation has yielded a lot of great lessons that I just want to recap for the leadershifters who have been watching and listening. First of all is the importance of remembering your mission. And this comes from the story you told. And even though in the moment it didn't resonate, but ultimately that's why people line up committed to their job, is understanding how what they do ties into a greater mission that aligns with the values. And certainly there's no better mission than keeping our you know, the residents of the United States and others of our friends safe, and being able to protect ourselves. But whatever your company mission and vision and values are, folks, don't forget them. They're so important. It's like the default place to go when you're feeling a little lost. Right.
And leaders tie what people do, what can seem like a very mundane task, right? A very unimportant task. It's the leader's job to tie that back to the purpose, to the mission.
Absolutely. Because it's easy to, like, you know, feel like in your silo and not remember how, like, this little job or that other job is connected to making the whole system work.
Right.
Yeah. Some of the other really great nuggets I thought came out of today are, it's not impossible to talk culture and, you know, softer leadership skills with companies who are highly populated with left brain types, you know, whether it be engineers or finance or lawyers or whatever.
Right.
And it's not impossible to change the culture of a command and control, historically organized company into one that is a little more agile, as you said. And I think the key is meet people where they are.
Right.
Speak their language, explain to them what's in it for them. And don't just make this radical, like, let's shift on a dime, because that's never going to work, right? We need to take it one step at a time and enroll everybody in the success, as it sounds like has happened with you guys.
Right.
And, you know, not to belabor the point about what you experienced after going through that intensive diversity and inclusion workshop, but we have to end sort of these, like, micro, I don't want to call them aggressions, but, you know, micro mistakes that, you know, cumulatively can build up to bigger biases and so forth. And so if you see something, say something, right? the TSA says that, right? If you see even just like a minor thing, professionally and politely and respectfully bring it to somebody's attention so they can make it right and they don't repeat that in cycles.
Right. And make it safe for that to occur, right?
Exactly.
Leaders
Anything else you would add as part of summary and wrap up here, Kurtis?
Well, I would just say that it's really up to leaders to model that kind of behavior, right? And my experience has been it's not comfortable modeling that kind of behavior. I mean, I had an employee recently tell me I was wrong in a very public setting. And my first thought was, oh no, that's just making me look horrible, right? And then I caught myself and thanked the employee in the public setting and said that kind of behavior is what we want to encourage. We want this team to be able to call out the leader or anybody else and say, hey, I either disagree or I have an opposable opinion, or you may not be correct on that, right? That's the kind of behavior that we want to encourage. And so, and I didn't look bad, right? In my own head, I might have looked bad, but the reality was that team walked away thinking, wow, he's human. We like this guy because he wants us to call him out, right? He wants us to question what he's doing. He wants us to push back. He wants us to have opposable. He's interested in hearing our voice.
Oh,
right?
Absolutely. Brilliant. I love it. Well, thank you for being you and modeling what other people can be doing, should be doing, and much continued success to you and MFC and Lockheed and Marillyn with 2 L's and
Thanks, Jamie. It's
and
been
all
such a
that.
pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thank you for being on the show. It's always a pleasure. Leadershifters, you know how to reach me. hello@theleadershiftproject.com, and of course on every social media that exists. Until next time, and thanks again, Kurtis.
Okay.
Bye, y'all.
Take care.